Okay, good afternoon. I'll step out of the way for a minute and let you see a picture of the power plant near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on my other computer. We'll talk about the power grid today. As Anton Petrov reported on his YouTube channel recently, on Monday, March 13, 6 days ago, 2023, there was a major solar incident event leading to a coronal mass ejection, which arrived, which across the orbit of the Earth, I think on that day. It was 9 days out of sync with where the Earth is. If it had happened on around March the 1st, or if it had happened 9 days later, is my understanding, like tomorrow or approximately, it might have hit the Earth right head on, and we might have had an event comparable to the Carrington event of 1859. There was an event in 2012, in July of 2012, was on July 23rd of 2012, which I believe was 9 days after the Earth had crossed the path that the coronal mass ejection had had spat out into the atmosphere. Of course, a CME can go at other angles from the sun. It doesn't have to intersect the orbit of the Earth. There are many other ones, but if it does happen to intersect the orbit of the Earth, then about once every 24 days or so, maybe for a 1 or 2 day period, there is a possibility of serious damage to the electrical grid on the Earth. And really large events are supposed to happen most often once every 11 years, or possibly there's another cycle that's like every 23 years. Not all 11-year periods are the same. And there's even another cycle that's every several hundred years, called the Miyake cycle, which may be from something else in space other than the sun. That's about every 400 or 500 years. We may be due for that. We don't have really good information on power grid security from mainstream media. We've heard a lot recently about attacks on stations around the country. There was a serious one in California in 2013, and of course you heard about the one in North Carolina late last fall. And there's also a danger that if a nuclear weapon were exposed in outer space, that there would be a huge effect, an EMP, electromagnetic pulse effect on Earth, and that an enemy could use that instead of an all-out nuclear weapon, thinking that the enemy could survive. That's something I've wondered about with Vladimir Putin's behavior. If he thinks that the world is going to become a zero-sum game, that he talks like he thinks that way, I've wondered about that. The media doesn't talk about that very much. An EMP attack, has 3 different pulses, and it's the third pulse that overwhelms transformers, which are of course very hard to replace because they're very large, or at least large transformers are. The first pulse is what actually fries personal electronics like your phone, your laptop, and so forth. And there's some discussion as to whether a solar storm really would affect personal electronics. It's been suggested that it might, but I think that's probably relatively dubious. Of course, you all remember that in February of 2021, there was a huge power incident in near failure in Texas during the winter, when they had to shut the Texas Interconnect down because of it being overloaded, and it was kind of difficult to bring it back up, and there was a lot of disruption in some parts of Texas for a week or so. It was a very serious incident. You would wonder if there was warning, because there's actually warning when there's a large solar storm that a CME is coming, that there might be time to shut down the grid and then bring it back up. But I don't know if our grid operators are able to really do that. You don't hear very much discussion about it. I do have an essay about the grid issue on Medium in 2018. I'll give a link to that. And back in 2013, I personally visited the Oak Ridge, center in Tennessee, and actually took the tour of the area. Excuse me. Also in 2012, it was a few days after the CME, which was July 23rd, I made a trip to southern West Virginia and visited the area around the Cayford mine, where the mountaintop removal is. I seem to have lost some of the pictures I took. I'll probably do another visit by car maybe this year. It's something I want to do again. But we don't have a really good plan for what we would do if there were a major disruption to our grid from particularly a solar storm or possibly from an enemy attack, which could be very large. There are devices that are not nuclear weapons that can also disrupt the power grid in many areas. It was talked about in Popular Mechanics back in 2001, and it was an article that's kind of been buried since then. It was actually, there was an article about it about a week or so before 9/11, which is kind of curious. I also remember that in October of 2003, there was a sort of a moderate solar storm on the same day that the Warner Brothers Smallville program had an episode about a solar flare affecting Clark Kent, the character played by Tom Welling. I think that's kind of an interesting coincidence. We had an incident in Quebec in I think it was 1989, and another near miss in 1972, and I think we had an incident in the 1920s. So there have been problems before, but our society is so dependent on technology that if the power were shut off for a very long time, there would be an enormous number of people who would not survive at all, including probably myself. I mean, we're in a unique situation where we are, in the way we live and our ability to survive, so dependent on technology that it would be something that an enemy could use as leverage against us, that in a way that wouldn't have been possible 100 years ago. So that's let me just bring up the blog post. There's a picture of a power grid on a model railroad, and I took in 2015. But there's the blog post. Some other stuff on it, but I will share that blog post with you and share the link. I think I can bring that up just real quickly. I didn't actually prep this for bring up my own cite my own legal name, and I think that the link is there's my article on Medium. So that's something I'll also give you a link to. But this is something that we need to take very, very seriously.